Let me tell you about my city. It's wild gritty.
And welcome into another episode of The Change-Up on WOAY Sports. Matt Digby joined by Tom Beal back after a quick week off. And it's already week 13 of high school football, if you could believe it. It's round 2 of the playoffs. 8 teams left in all 3 classes. That's a total of 24. And this is really where the teams that are in this stage are really thinking about making it to Wheeling for the state championships, Tom.
Well, these are the guys that have separated themselves. And fortunately, we have one of the representatives from one of those teams here with us today, Coach David Moneypenny from Fayetteville. How you doing, Coach? You guys are on a great run this season.
Yeah, we're doing fine. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, the kids they're playing really, really hard, and yeah, got a lot of heart. So we're happy with the way they've been performing.
So let's get into last week you guys have the big 28-0 playoff win over Van, and for every player that's on this team, that was the first playoff win that they've experienced. And I talked to you a little bit about it earlier this week, but just how much of an emotional lift was it for those guys and a confidence builder that they can not only have an undefeated regular season, but also have continued success throughout the postseason?
Yeah, I mean, that's I think you're right. It's a big thing for these kids. These seniors in particular. This is their team. This is their year. They've been working extremely hard the last 3 years, and to finish the season out the way that we did was pretty spectacular for them. Difficult to do that, but they also understood that season's over and the new season's up, and that's the playoffs. We just try to keep things in perspective with them, and they're a real good group of kids. They're intelligent. They're poised. They don't seem to get rattled much, and they understand what's at stake here, and they did what they had to do in that week to prepare for Van, and we went out and played a good football game, and they were a pretty tough team for us, but we got fortunate and came out with the win, so it worked out for us.
Yeah, and you said you guys had the week off. The way the schedule worked out for you, you had your 10 games all in a row, and then week 11 off. So you did have that extra week to prepare for the Bulldogs. Now that the Van game is behind you, how much do you say in hindsight it was that big of an impact?
Well, like I said, these kids, they prepared well for that game, and having that first playoff win, kind of gives you that confidence that you need, and they know that the next game up with Wheeling Central here is just as important. It's one of those things where you win, you continue, you lose, you're done, and so there's a sense of urgency, but at the same time, the kids they understand that this is just another football game, and we don't really want to overreact. Just want to kind of keep things in perspective and keep focused on what our task is here, and just try to continue to clean up some things that need to be cleaned up on both sides of the ball in our kicking game, and implement the game plan and go out there and compete and see what we can do.
So every team's plan is to get up to Wheeling, and you guys are actually going to try to do that by playing Wheeling. So now that you've had a chance to break down some game film, what have you seen from this team, and what are you up against this week?
That's a good question. They're very well coached. Very well coached. As far as technique, probably the best technique-oriented team that we play. They're not gonna make a lot of mistakes. With their assignments as far as who they're blocking and their gap fits on defense and coverages and all those types of things. I mean, they're very, very well coached. They have a lot of kids. They have a lot of depth. They have a lot of speed. They can pack it in and run it at you. They can spread it out and throw. They can also do a little bit of both in between. It's defensively they're there. They know how to stop that run. They're athletic. They can stop the pass. They can do a lot of different things. And a kicking game is just toughest part to defend because they have so much speed and that open field. It's really, really hard to contain them. So it's a tough team. I mean, they're probably as good as anybody we've played, maybe the best up to this point. It's like you said earlier. This is kind of when you get down to 18, this is where the rubber meets the road, and there's nobody in there in this tournament, if you will, that doesn't deserve to be there. And it's all about us doing the same thing. Continuing to work good technique and make sure on defense, we align properly and we leverage the ball and run good angles. And on offense, we make sure that, we understand our assignments on who we're blocking and how to attack certain things that they get to us. And, kicking game, just keep doing what we're doing. So it's, going to be a tough game. Very well coached, and, we have a lot of depth. So, Bowling Central is, they're the epitome of single-A football. They have been for the last 15, 20 years. So nothing's changed up there. You got a really good club.
All right, and so through the week of preparation and practice, what's been the number one emphasis? Is it more scheme-related things based on how you guys are going to attack them, conditioning? What are you really trying to hone in on with your team this week?
Well, it's probably all the above. As far as conditioning part, but that's probably water under the bridge at this point. We're going to probably be in as good a shape as we're going to be able to be in. Schematically, is probably we're not going to be changing a lot of things. It's just really a matter of right now adapting what we do to what they do, and trying to get those pieces of the puzzle to fit for us, and making sure that we understand, what they're going to be, what kind of looks they're going to be giving us, and how are we going to respond to those types of looks. That's pretty much what we're looking at this week, and just keeping the momentum and keeping the emotions at a good level. Don't want to get too high. You don't want to stay too low. You want to keep things in perspective, like I said earlier. So it's more just, hey, what do they do? What are we going to do against that? And, what are we going to do? And what do we feel that they do with us? And try to create those types of scenarios and rep those and clean them up.
So with the size of your roster, how difficult is it to assemble a scout team in practice to prepare for a team like Wheeling Central?
Well, that's a good question. It's difficult, very difficult, especially to simulate the type of speed that they have. We've been, we have a low squad. So a lot of things that we do is with trash cans. We stick trash cans out there to simulate, the opponent's, offensive line or defensive line, and the trash cans don't move, trash cans don't block. So we don't get those types of looks all the time in practice, but. It seems to work for us. The small school like here at Fayetteville, you just really have to adapt. Can't get all concerned about the things that other teams are able to do and what you can't do. Just one of those things. We adapt and we overcome, and the kids have played real well. With this, and they've responded extremely well, and we're just going to continue to keep doing what we've been doing because it's worked.
Yeah, and speaking of adapting, you guys, for a large part of the game last week against Van, kind of shifted away from your usual game plan, because usually you guys are attacking through the air, but last week, Jordan Dempsey, 3 touchdowns on the ground. What was that kind of change of pace going up against that Van team? Because I know they do take a lot of pride in being the ground Bulldogs themselves.
Yeah, you're right. That was one of the things that we were concerned about, is their ability to stop the run, because they are a run-dominant team. Typically, those types of teams, if you're a strong run team, you usually are a strong, defensively run team as well. You can stop the run. So, but that's what they were giving us. We found out early we could run the football, and that's one of the keys to our success. If we find something early that's working, we will continue to use that. There's really no point trying to do anything else. And we were fortunate to be able to do that. Our offensive line was blocking real well up front. Jordan Dempsey and David Gillen were running the ball real nice up inside and around the edges. And it's just one of those things where if it's working, stick with it, and if it's not, try to go plan B, plan C until you can find something that's worked. We were surprised that we could run the ball as well against them, but it worked out for us.
It did, and then on defense as well, I remember especially the first quarter after you guys got on the board first, Van had a very efficient drive going down the field, getting in the red zone, but then Alex Hewitt comes up with the interception, and that kind of really took a lot of air out of them, for lack of a better phrase. But the way it's been for you guys in terms of recovering from that physical game against the Bulldogs, how has that affected them over the past few days?
Well, we're healthy. Everybody seems to be in good shape as far as, the physicalness of the game. And, our kids are tough. I mean, we do run the football, and you have to have some toughness to be able to run the football. So, when we're facing a run team, they're going to bang on us, but I think over the weeks we've become a lot tougher to that, and it's really shown because I think Van, that one kid that Van had, I think they had 1,800 yards rushing and plus 20 plus touchdowns, and he still got his yards, but we were able to keep those guys out of the end zone, and it wasn't easy. We had to toughen up. We had to be physical in our own right to slow those guys down. So our kids are tough. We don't have a lot of them, but they're physically tough. And, they're mentally tough, and I think that, like I said, it has a lot to do with our success. And maybe off the field as well, because these kids are pretty smart in the classroom. So it's a good group of kids.
So last week, it was all about the ground game and trying to control the clock and really dominate the possession there. This week, is that going to be a similar game plan, or is it more advantageous for you guys to kind of, go out and try to be more aggressive on offense and get points on the board early?
Well, we feel against Willing Central, we'll probably, be looking at both. We're going into this week. We need to be able to run the football, and we feel that. We feel that way every week. Running that football is more my style. If you can run the football, I think it makes the game run, go a lot smoother. But it's going to be tough. I mean, we're going to, Will's going to have to be able to throw the ball a little bit. We're going to have to give him some protection up front, which is the key to passing is our pass protection. But it's all about the offensive line and what are we able to do with the looks that they give us. If we can protect Will, we'll get the ball down the field. If we can open up holes and and kick people down, knock some people down, we're going to try to run that ball. So it's one of those things we got to go back and forth, I think, because they're a really good football team. I mean, they're very capable of stopping the run. They're very capable of stopping the pass. So it's one of those things you just got to kind of mix it up a little bit, see what's working for us and go with it.
Absolutely. And also, how much do you take into account weather conditions? Because looking at the forecast right now, hopefully it changes between now and Saturday afternoon. But right now, the weather forecast for Saturday is not exactly kind. Well, I'm not sure if kind is the right word, but certainly it would favor more of a run-heavy type game rather than a pass-heavy type game.
It's playoff weather.
Yeah, it absolutely is playoff weather. How much does weather play a role in preparation?
Well, I think a lot. I mean, it can. It's always good to be able to run the football this time of year. I've always been told. But we've had some games in particular. I think Nicholas County, where we were in a torrential downpour the entire game, and it didn't really seem to affect Will Fent throwing the football. I think he was very, he was able to do that. Of course, it's always nice to be able to run it. It's time of the year when you get in snow and rain and possibly muddy field conditions. I think it's more susceptible to the run game, and we're able to do that. And of course, Willing Central's they know how to do it too. They know how to run that football. It's going to be one of those things where, we hope that weather can dictate that we have more success than they do, and that's kind of one of those things that we're looking at. I haven't really paid too much attention to the weather, but I do hear it could be bad, so we'll see.
Coach, another thing we talked about earlier this week is the community support for you guys this season. People, now you've been winning a lot of games, been coming out to see you guys. What's the level of buzz been like throughout the community and more specifically at the school this week? Are people really getting into this game, getting hyped up for it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is small town, USA, Fayetteville, single-A football. I mean, I think that's one of the big things about living in a small community and having a small town is things like this really, really creates like a beehive effect. Everybody's buzzing about it. I mean, it creates a lot of excitement, and not that it doesn't in the bigger communities, but it seems like in the smaller communities, it's proportionally just bigger, and it brings a lot of people together. And I'm telling you, I really think these types of things create a good atmosphere with our student body as well. Even just with the ebb and flow of how school days go, academic, all those things. It's really a positive thing for us right now, and these kids have really handled it extremely well. Proud of them, and we've got a lot of community support. It's really helped.
So they're not walking the halls like rock stars, what you're saying?
Possibly, they're good kids. They don't, they're not. They're pretty humble, to be honest with you. And I was, we felt, early in the year, if we did have success, success on the field and we could make the playoffs, and we were wondering how these kids would handle some things because, like you said earlier, they've never. This is the first playoff win for all these kids, and the success that we continue to have throughout the year, I really watched how they handled it, and it didn't really seem to bother them at all. I mean, they stayed poised, they stayed on track, and they stayed very detailed on the next game, and that's what we're doing this week. So they've handled it pretty well.
Yeah, and I think it was Dalton who I was talking to said that the fact that they hadn't really been in this position before, it kind of takes some of the pressure off of them because they don't feel like they're a team who's expected. They've already exceeded expectations so far that at this point in the season they can really just relax and go out and play football. So I'm sure that's made a huge difference in the psyche of your guys as you head into this next round.
Yeah, well said. He understands. I mean, and that makes a lot of sense. And like I said, the maturity of these kids it's just really unbelievable the way that they handle things. And he's right. I mean, we're new to this. This group's new to this. Fayetteville High School isn't, but this group of kids is new to this, and that's a good point that he made. The pressure really isn't on us; the pressure's on the other ones who've been there and done it. So we're excited about that. These kids have prepared well, and they got good head on their shoulders. No question about it.
Absolutely, and let's see. Let's try to see if this ride can continue. Again, this game is on Saturday at 1:30, which means you were talking about it before we started the program. One of your assistant coaches is going to be heading up to St. Mary's to scout potential next week opponent as Gilmer County takes on St. Mary's in the second round. If Fayetteville wins on Saturday, they'd be taking the winner of Gilmer County and St. Mary's. What kind of challenges is that in terms of getting ready for potential next week opponent and also this week opponent, the fact that it's a Saturday, it's not a Friday night, you have that extra night of preparation?
Yeah, exactly. We'll have a little run through on Friday, the things that we typically do on Thursday, and then we'll break out from there, and I'll probably be in that car, and we'll probably be heading up north and back to St. Mary's where we originally we scrimmaged them. That's our first scrimmage was up at St. Mary's, so. And maybe return to the scene of the crime, if you will, and in hopes of seeing some things that may help us, the following week if we advance. So, I mean, it's just one of those things. It's a time of the year where you got a time man, you got to be a time manager, and you just got to, drink a lot of coffee.
Absolutely. I got to ask though, seeing St. Mary's or Gilmer County, who's coached by former Fayette County High School sports standout Steve Schuff, which one would present the biggest challenge to you right now, would you say?
Well, I tell you, I'm a Stevie Schuff fan. I coached Stevie Schuff in high school. When I first started coaching Midland Trail, he was a junior, senior over there, and you're right, he was quite a standout athlete. There's no question about it, and you can see what he's done on the field and on the basketball court. He's got his son there quarterbacking, so Stevie's done an incredible job up there at Gilmer County. Really proud of him. He's a Fayette County boy. So, they both pose a lot of problems. But like I said, I think Gilmer County is a lot like us. Small in numbers, big and hard. You just don't know what's going to happen on a given night. So, we're supporting Gilmer County and Coach Schuff up there, and of course St. Mary's. What can you say about St. Mary's? It hasn't already been said. They're as good as they get. I mean, they're a Williamstown. They're Williams Central. I mean, those are the names that you talk about year in and year out in single A football, and it's not going to change. They bring it every night, and it's going to be tough. Either way we go. Stevie Schuff and Gilmer County, or St. Mary's with Coach Moat. So it's what do you do?
Yeah, well, maybe after Saturday, Fayetteville will be one of those schools that we're talking about as the single A power. So best of luck to you guys. Looking forward to seeing how this game plays out, and maybe we'll get to talk to you again here after a big win.
Yeah, anytime. Absolutely. We look forward to that.
All right, thank you very much,
Best
Coach.
of luck Saturday, Coach, and we'll talk to you later.
All right, sounds good, guys. Thanks so much for having us.
All right,
absolutely.
Take care.
That was David Moneypenny, the head coach of Fayetteville High School football. Pirates are in action Saturday at 1:30 p.m. over at Fletcher Arrett Stadium. They will be taking on Wheeling Central in the second round of Class Single A, and I think it's going to be a very good matchup. you talk about the tests that Fayetteville has gone through. Really, from what I've seen in the schedule, they were tested a bit by Greenbrier West in the season finale. But you go back against the other teams they've played. Nicholas County presented the strong test. Buffalo presented the very strong test. Van, obviously, they had to qualify for the playoffs themselves, so they weren't going to be an easy test. But Wheeling Central really is going to be a huge mark in terms of measuring where the Pirates stack up in Class Single A.
Well, yeah, and the big thing, we talked about this at the time, those games like the Nicholas County game, like the Buffalo game, those really close, grinded out, back and forth type of games that they were able to come out on top of. It puts them through some adversity, and they know how to deal with that now. So now they're coming back against a tough Wheeling Central team, and they know how to blow teams out. We've seen them do that a million times throughout the season, but they also know how to win these close games. And when you get to the playoffs, that's more often than not how you're going to win a game. They're not going to go run through everyone 28-0 like they did against Van last week. Wheeling Central, by all accounts, is a much tougher team. They're one of the single A perennial powers, so it's most likely going to be a closer game. And I think having gone through that adversity of some of these teams earlier in the season, that's going to pay huge dividends for them this Saturday, and we'll see what happens. I mean, you never know really at this time of year, but I think they have as good a chance as anyone. They've had an outstanding season.
Again, 1:30 the kickoff time on Saturday, and Fayetteville is not the only area team still playing football. You see James Monroe's helmet. The Mavericks are in the second round of Class AA. They will be on the road at third-seeded Point Pleasant. That game is on Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Mavericks coming off a come-from-behind win over Winfield in the 6-11 game last week, a game where kind of took them a while. You were there. It took them a while to get going, but when they did, they just found a way to click.
Yeah, and it seemed real early on. James Monroe wasn't running away with it by any means, but it seemed like they were the better team. And then, kind of heading into the end of the first quarter, start of the second quarter, Winfield seemed to gain a little bit of momentum there. So it always seemed to me like James Monroe was the better team, but they kind of let Winfield get into it a little bit and get themselves established. So, moving forward, that's going to have to be something that they, try not to let the teams get into the games if they consider themselves the better team. I think that just what they've done, though, they're just consistently top to bottom. They're just a really good football team. They don't necessarily have anyone who stands out over the top. They have a lot of guys who contribute and do a lot of different things for them on both sides of the ball. It seems like everyone's a two-way player there, and they do a really good job as a defensive unit, and then just using a lot of misdirection in the run game, with play actions and, screens and pitches and all that good stuff. So they're a really tough team that can attack you from a lot of different angles, and hopefully they can keep the ball rolling this week.
Yeah, I'll be headed down to Linside later today. You can see my talk with Coach Mustaine and his team coming up on Thursday night on Newswatch at 11. They are going to be on the road in the 6-3 matchup at Point Pleasant. And like you were saying, it was letting team like Winfield back in the game like they did last week. It was very similar to what I saw when they played Herbert Hoover in last year's playoffs, the 6-11 matchup. It was just one of those nights where no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't correct, you don't really want to say stupid mistakes at the high school level, but it was mistakes that very easily could have been avoided. They weren't able to avoid them last year against the Huskies. They were able to correct them last week against the Generals, and that's going to be big when they take on Point Pleasant on the road this week.
Yeah, and I think, if you ask the players themselves, they would probably consider them stupid mistakes. When you're a high school player, you have those high expectations of yourself, but it's important that you don't let yourself get beat up by those errors. You identify them, you adjust, you figure out what they are, what you have to do differently, and the good teams, they bounce back and they do the things right. So, Point Pleasant, very, very tough team. We've seen that over the last several years, how, they've been a dominant force, but I think James Monroe, they have definitely the right mentality to do it. The energy on Friday night was very high. They believe in themselves, and they're a team, they play with a bit of swagger out there. So they go out and they're ready to play football, and they don't feel that anyone can beat them. So that's always a key ingredient.
And it really will be a key ingredient on Saturday because we've seen Point Pleasant against a couple area teams. They won on the road at West Side. They beat Princeton in their final game of the regular season, so that's going to be a very unique challenge for the Mavericks. In the meantime, we did have 3 other area schools qualify for the playoffs, but their seasons are over after losses in the first round. We had Summers County on the road at Gilmer County, And that was, from what I was seeing, reading the tweets as that night went on, it was just, again, a lot of mistakes that could have been avoided. Let Gilbert County get out to a big lead. Bobcats were able to pull it back to a 14-point game, and that would be the final score, 34-20. But again, take nothing away from Summers County. I mean, it was always going to be the big elephant in the room. How does this team respond to the graduation of Matt Ryan? And your answer, a second straight playoff appearance.
Yeah, well, and they did it on the backs of Nathan Grimmett, in addition to a lot of other guys, but he was really the catalyst for them offensively. And I asked Coach Nate Tanner a couple weeks ago, did you expect Nathan Grimmett to have this type of season and really step up in the void of Matt Ryan? He said, I did. He knew the type of talent that this kid had and the mentality that he had, and he stepped up to the plate. The reclassification brought them down to single A, and they never doubted themselves. They just kept on rolling, and they came up against the Gilmer County team that is a very talented football team. Just watching the highlights, it seemed like they just they had just too much firepower, and then Summers County even got that one break where they had the sack and the fumble set them up first and goal, and then the very next play, the quarterback who got sacked and fumbled actually picks off the pass from Nathan Grimmett and takes it 75 yards back. So it's just one of those things that doesn't always break for you in the playoffs. These things happen, but take nothing away from them. They had an outstanding season, and hopefully the program can keep on rolling.
Absolutely. Then we had two teams in the Class AA playoffs in action on Friday. One was Independence, the Patriots, back in the postseason for a second straight year after qualifying as the 16th seed in 2015. They were the 9th seed and very easily could have had a home game for the first round had they not lost in Week 11 on the road at Roane County. But they had a tough test on the road at Lincoln, a game that really was very back and forth for much of the first half. But then Lincoln kind of made some adjustments in the second quarter. From then on out, they were able to get the road win at home. Independence's season ends at 8-3, but still a lot of things for the Patriots to be proud of.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how big of a factor that home field advantage really played into that game. If roles had been reversed and Independence was at home, maybe the result was different. But I'll tell you, the Patriots probably had the most highlight plays for a team to lose like that in the playoffs. I had 3 plays in our Geno's top 5. Number 1 being Marcus Guy's just ridiculous.
You mean Odell Beckham?
Yeah, that's how I phrased it. It was just an outstanding catch, and I mean they have just outstanding talent on that team. We've seen Guy make a number of acrobatic plays like that throughout the season. Noah Adams coming over from the wrestling circus, deciding I want to play football one more time before I graduate, and he comes in as one of the most dominant players in the area. He had a big touchdown run in that game, and they just they do so many things running the football. Connor Gibson, another piece of that puzzle. So it was a good season for them. They played really hard and they were really competitive throughout the year. But Lincoln, great team, and once again, you got to give them credit.
Absolutely. And Noah Adams, by the way, he signed his letter of intent last week, the night before the Lincoln game, to take on or to continue wrestling at WVU. He had previously verbal to Virginia Tech, but rescinded that verbal several months ago and then signed his letter of intent the Thursday before the Lincoln game to wrestle at WVU.
He was in a no-lose situation heading into that game. No matter what happened, he's got his scholarship set
Absolutely,
up.
yeah. He's going to be starting his wrestling season in a couple weeks, so we wish him the best of luck this season and also next year up at Morgantown. And then our second AA team that lost on Friday, Nicholas County. And in general terms, you take a look at what the Grizzlies accomplished, a 9-2 season, a playoff appearance. However, there's always going to be that bad taste because of the way it ended. A loss to Kaiser at home, and a game that Kaiser really had the momentum from the opening kickoff, and Nicholas County just couldn't get any momentum as the night went on.
Yeah, I'm sure it's got to be frustrating because they were a team that their defense all season long was outstanding. Aside from that Fayetteville shootout anomaly, I mean, they just prior to that they'd given up 9 points at that point in the season, no points the week before that game. So, I mean, they were a defense that was just rolling. And then whereas James Monroe kind of gets it done with a bunch of different guys on offense, their offense primarily runs through Tate Mays, their do-it-all quarterback, and Carter Siebert-Sweeney. And they like to throw that deep ball. And I think Kaiser, really keyed in on that. You saw them playing their safeties back a lot, and they were able to make some plays on Mays throwing the deep ball. He wasn't able to quite draw the defense in like he was earlier in the season where, he would kind of establish those long passes with some quarterback keepers and things to draw the safeties up and then throw it over the top. And, get into the playoffs, and these teams are generally a lot smarter, a lot better coached, and sometimes they adjust to some of the things that you do well, and they were able to take that away from them.
Absolutely. Well, a great season, though, for the Grizzlies. They do finish 9-2. Again, Fayetteville and James Monroe are the two area teams still playing with a chance to get to Wheeling. Pirates are playing on Saturday at 1:30 against Wheeling Central. James Monroe will be on the road at Point Pleasant at 7:30 on Saturday, taking on Point Pleasant up in northwest West Virginia, I guess is what you could call that area of the state.
All the way west.
But we have also a couple other sports. Volleyball finished up last week with the state tournament. We had teams from all three classes making the quarterfinals. Fayetteville in Class Single A, they lost to Williamstown, but then we had three teams, two from AA, one from AAA that made the state semifinals. Woodrow Wilson making the semifinals, and in Class AAA they lost a tough semifinal matchup with, I believe it was Musselman, I'm thinking off the top of my head. Yes, they beat Spring Valley in the quarterfinals. They lost to Musselman. And then James Monroe and Pikeview, the two Region 3 representatives from Class AA, both making the semifinals. It was always going to be tough matchups for them in the semifinals. Lady Mavs losing to defending champion Philip Barber. Bridgeport beating Pikeview. Those two schools, Philip Barber and Bridgeport, always very talented. Bridgeport seems to be talented in everything, quite frankly, with football, baseball,
some schools
volleyball.
are just like that, man.
Exactly.
But no matter what sport they're
But
playing.
it was a great volleyball season. I had a chance to see a lot of schools. I know you haven't gotten to see as much, but still a good season for volleyball.
Got to see a little bit, and I liked what I saw. This. What really strikes me is the enthusiasm that the girls on all these teams show. Every single point they really do a good job of playing for one another, and the camaraderie and the cheering, which blows my eardrums out. But I mean, they really play for each other, and they have a great bond. And I think that's what makes a lot of these teams in the area so talented. They work hard, and they were able to. A couple of teams have some deep playoff runs. So shout out to James Monroe, Woodrow Wilson, and everyone else that had a great season.
Absolutely, and that will more or less wrap up the fall sports meeting. Once the football season ends, and we get to look forward to basketball, we'll be getting into that in future episodes, as we're not too far away from basketball. We had one state championship last year. Wondering if we can get maybe one or two this year. It's certainly not outside the realm of possibility, but that's something to keep an eye on as the coming months arrive. We're going to take a quick break. Coming back, we'll take a look at some college football. West Virginia, they are still in position to win the Big 12 title. They are 8-1 right now, getting ready for what is without question their biggest game of the year. Always was going to be their biggest game of the year when they hosted the University of Oklahoma. And I think with the recent developments with the latest college football playoff rankings, that's only raised the profile of this game. It's going to be a Saturday night primetime game right here on WOAY. And we'll also talk Marshall and Virginia Tech, as those teams still have two games left in their regular season. Virginia Tech will almost definitely be going to a bowl game. But that we'll discuss that in just a bit. You're listening to The Change Up on WOAY Sports. Back to the Change Up on WOAY Sports. Matt Digby, Tom Beal. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at SportsWOAY. That's for both social media accounts. Special thanks to Showtime Music for this great microphone they have. Very nice old school setup. And I know your buddy down in Richmond, Virginia with the music.
Got to give him a shout out. My man John Canada is what he goes by on SoundCloud. Check him out. He's working with Gritty City Records, making some really cool hip-hop beats. And, if you like what you're hearing on the show, we talk over it coming in and makes it sound a little cooler as we join the show. Go check him out on SoundCloud. It's John Canada.
Well, I don't think a lot makes it sound cooler than talking about WVU football in this part of the country.
What a
Mountaineers they're getting ready for a big showdown, primetime showdown on WOAY Saturday Night Football with the University of Oklahoma. We talked about it leading into this game, that it was always going to be a big game, but now it's finally here. It's finally game week with the Sooners.
Massive game, too. I mean, I think 8-1. I don't know how many people expected the Mountaineers to be at this point, but a huge opportunity for them to kind of to jump over the Sooners. And, Sooners fresh off a big 45-24 win over Baylor, so, they're coming in playing their best football, and I can't wait for this one. It's going to be a real exciting matchup.
Yeah, coming into the season, West Virginia had yet to beat 2 Big 12 schools. I think one of those 2 might be fairly obvious. Can you name both of them?
Well, I'm going to go with Oklahoma, and would it be Baylor?
It would not be Baylor. It was Kansas State, the hurdle they cleared
State.
back in October.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Because they were able to come from behind, and it looked like, again, this year, like Kansas State was going to get the better of West Virginia this year, but the Mountaineers were able to come from behind, get the Kansas State monkey off their back.
Well, they've liked their close games a lot this year, whether they're ahead or behind. They like to make it interesting down the stretch. So hopefully, if it's going to be interesting this time, it'll be a nice high-scoring game. We'll see some good plays up on the board, and I think we're going to have an exciting one.
I think so, especially with the motivation provided to the Mountaineers by the College Football Playoff Committee. The latest rankings are out. Mountaineers only rising up 2 spots to 14. They are right behind 3-loss and 13th ranked USC. I probably should have switched that to provide the suspense. 13th ranked and 3-loss USC.
They don't like them.
If I'm a Mountaineer fan, I feel insulted right now.
Yeah, the college football playoff guys, they don't like West Virginia for some reason. I'm not sure what's going on.
They don't like the Big 12 in general. And granted, it has not been an easy non-conference season for the Big 12. You talk about the marquee program, Oklahoma.
Now, did they move up at all in the latest rankings? I think they were 11th last week.
Yeah, either 11 or 10, and they are up to 9th this week. So it is 9 against 14. But according to the AP, though, both teams are in the top 10. It's going to be the first AP top 10 game in Morgantown since 1993, when the Mountaineers hosted Miami, back when both schools were part of the Big East Conference. But it's going to be a great matchup, I think. Oklahoma definitely has put whatever happened wrongly for them against Houston and against Ohio State behind them. They know that if they win out, they are the Big 12 champions. And West Virginia, if they win out, they will probably have at least a share of the title. They would still need Oklahoma to beat Oklahoma State to close the regular season to have the conference title in their to have the tiebreaker is what I meant to say. But looking at West Virginia, the way they were able to go on the road to Texas this past weekend and get the win, that really shows the mettle of this team and how they've come together in tough times.
Yeah, crucial. And, we knew from the beginning of the season they were going to have a huge advantage only having 4, real road games. I know there's, the BYU at FedEx Field and all that, but only really having to,
we can't call that a road game.
Only having to, go out on the road 4 times this season was a huge benefit for them. But it also means that they really have to step up in those road games, and they did big time against Texas. I know they had some turnovers early on. Emotions were high, some pregame scuffles, Dana Holgorsen yelling. But, they settled down. They did what they had to do to get the win. And now they come back home, the friendly confines of Milan Paskir Stadium. So that will probably play a huge role. And I think that, it's a night game. The crowd's going to be they're loud. They're going to be rowdy. That stadium's going to be packed. And they're going to try to create a real hostile environment for the Sooners to come into.
Absolutely. One more thing about that Texas game, the fact that they were able to do that performance and get the road win against the Longhorn team that really at this point is playing for Coach Charlie Strong's job, regardless of how they finish the rest of the season. They are still well in control of their own destiny.
They weren't laying down for anybody.
But the one thing I found interesting also at the very end of that game, it was to the point where Texas had a chance for a Hail Mary touchdown to win, and it was an incomplete pass. But I remember them reviewing to see if WVU had 12 men in the field, and I remember watching the replay. Brady Quinn was doing the color that day for FS1. He was circling everybody who was on the field, and he was circling 1, 2, 3, 4. He skipped over 5. He went straight to 6, and through that counting method, there were indeed 12 men on the field, and apparently they must have showed it on the Jumbotron, because then you could hear on the TV broadcast the Texas fans' reaction saying, oh, that should be a flag. Texas should get one last play. But then he recounted everything right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way through 11. It was not a foul for too many men on the field for WVU. So
I don't know what that says about that Notre Dame education system there. Probably
or that double,
moment.
or that Dublin, Ohio education for that matter. That's me coming from one of the next towns over in Central Ohio.
Oh, okay.
Something like that. But regardless, WVU gets the win. They are 8-1, and I tell you, one guy who did not see that coming, I got to mention this, our good friend Cam Huffman. Back when he was the sports editor of the Register Herald at the beginning of the year, he made several big predictions, and he was right on a lot of them, such as one team from West Virginia would win a basketball state championship. That was Wyoming East Girls. He correctly called Mike D'Antoni being a head coach in the NBA again. He's now with the Houston Rockets.
That's been fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. But the one prediction we got to call him out on, he did say WVU would have another 7-5 season. They're 8-1 now, so they could go 8-4 to close out 2016, maybe 8-5.
Can you really blame him? I mean, coming into this season, we just didn't know what they were going to look like defensively, and that's really been a huge difference makers. They've been able to keep a lot of these games, with the close games, they've been able to keep it low scoring and give their offense a chance to go out and win the game late, and that's just been due to some major improvement by the young guys in the secondary, really stepping up and coming of age quickly. And we've seen, Skylar Howard's just been Skylar Howard that he was last year and then some. And the receivers have come along. He has, a whole arsenal of guys. The running back game he's been able to use different guys. Russell Shell earlier in the year, and then lately it's been a lot more Justin Crawford and Kennedy McCoy. So they have so many weapons offensively. We knew it was going to be a big part of it, but I think the offense has been even better than we thought. And the defense has really elevated their game, but I think that's the big difference.
Absolutely. Defense will be taking on Baker Mayfield, Oklahoma's quarterback, who at the beginning of the year was very much in the talks for certainly an invitation to New York for the Heisman ceremony, if not a legitimate Heisman contender himself. I think that talk is kind of ended, and I think any talk not involving Lamar Jackson has pretty much ended at this point. It's just a matter of getting to December 10th and actually awarding Lamar Jackson the trophy. I think that's almost a foregone conclusion among many college football's avid followers. But again, 8 o'clock the game time. Probably will kick off actually closer to 8:12 in Morgantown by Pushkar Stadium. Going to be sold out. We can almost pretty much assume it's going to be that way for a primetime game. Chris Fowler, Kirk Herbstreit will be calling that game on WOAY.
The best in the
business.
business.
So that should be a very fun atmosphere. And
I'll be there.
You will be there, yeah, absolutely. That's the real reason to go, because you'll see Tom Beal on national TV. That's exactly why.
Give me a wave if you're there.
But moving ahead, we have other teams in action. Marshall closing their road portion of the regular season at Florida International. Thundering Herd getting a big win at home against Middle Tennessee, a game that we will admit we picked Middle Tennessee to win that game. But then again, we probably should have known, especially me, because I've been here a couple of years now. You can't really go against Marshall when they're playing that certain weekend in November, the anniversary of the plane crash. It's now been 46 years since they lost the 75, including head coach George Tolley, all the players, all the assistant coaches, the boosters, Gene Morehouse, the late father of our good friend Keith Morehouse. He was Marshall's radio voice, and I think to some extent he was also their sports information director. He was also in that plane crash in 1970. But going back, again, a very efficient performance, particularly the second half for the Thundering Herd. They outscored the Blue Raiders 28-0.
Yeah, and I'm sure that was a big emotional factor for them heading into this game. There was no way I was going to pick Marshall to win a game until they showed me something like this. It's just been that much of a struggle for them this season. But, they stepped up and they got a big win, and I'm sure that they're playing for pride at this point in the season, so I'm sure it feels really good to get that one under their belt, and hopefully they can close this thing out strong.
Absolutely, and they're going to be taking on a Florida International team that has had trouble themselves. They fired their coach, Ron Turner, back in September after an 0-4 start. They've kind of righted the ship a bit with interim coach Ron Cooper, and then they made fairly significant news this week by hiring Butch Davis as their new head coach starting 2017. The former Miami Hurricanes coach, the Cleveland Browns coach, the North Carolina Tar Heels coach. He's right now in the record books as the only coach to take the Cleveland Browns to the playoffs since their return to the National Football League. And now he's going to be taking over in a different part of Miami, but again, in South Florida.
Now, wait, this isn't the same Florida school whose tight end just got lost for the season, who had scalding hot water dumped over his head.
I don't think so.
Are you familiar with this story?
I've heard something. Yeah,
I wasn't sure if it was Florida International or one of these other schools.
Yeah,
one of the top tight ends in the nation. And,
I probably should look it up on my phone right now, or maybe after the show.
An unfortunate event. Hopefully not that team, but yeah, Butch Davis coming in. Hopefully he can make a big difference. We've seen some big names come into Florida International before in other sports. Isaiah Thomas came in and coached them for a few years after the Knicks debacle, we'll call it. So hopefully, a name like that, you can get some big recruits in and elevate the status of the program.
Yeah, and another tidbit about FIU, I think it is FIU instead of Florida Atlantic. That was a couple years ago. Didn't they have the one guy who was on pace to break Robin Ventura's streak of straight games with a base hit?
I forget the man's name.
Yeah, I forget it too, but that was a fun little tidbit to keep an eye on several years ago. But that game is at 7 o'clock. We have Marshall's back home on the following Saturday to close out the month of November and to really close out the regular season at this point with the game against Western Kentucky, the Hilltoppers back in Huntington. It was 2 years ago that the Hilltoppers stunned Marshall and ruined their hopes of a perfect season. And then last year over in Bowling Green, Kentucky, the game that was essentially the de facto Conference USA East Championship game, Western Kentucky won that pretty handily. Of course, Marshall really wasn't the same after going with Chase Litton, the true freshman, as a starting quarterback, but now he's got a year experience. And I think he should be in line for a good end to the regular season, certainly giving them a chance against FIU, if not against Western Kentucky.
Yeah, and I think when we look back at this season, this will be kind of looked at as like the sophomore slump for Chase Litton. He had obviously a great, first game against, Morgan State, granted, but I think that Akron game where he was shook up a little bit, and I think he just kind of struggled from that point through the middle part of the season. Some tough opponents contribute to that as well, but he's kind of righted the ship in these last couple of weeks. He's played a little bit better. Hopefully he can close this season out strong. And then, moving forward, as he's now going to be an upperclassman, junior and senior, hopefully he can kind of take a leadership role and elevate his play to be more consistent. We've seen that he has the talent. He's got a good arm. He's a big, tall, strong quarterback. So really I think it's learning how to develop consistency at the Division I level that will allow him to take the next step and allow the whole herd as a program to be better. And, this week, a great opportunity to do that against one of the better teams in Conference USA.
And another team with a great opportunity to bounce back after a loss, meanwhile, is Virginia Tech. The Hokies this past weekend taking on Georgia Tech. They had an opportunity to clinch the ACC Coastal Division right then and there, but they really laid an egg against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. A game that, frankly, was not as close as a 30-20 final score might indicate. You were there, Tom.
Yeah, it was not a close game. I'll tell you that right now. It was 20-0 at halftime, basically over at that point. The offense just really never got a rhythm established. And, Gerard Evans, after the game, he talked about, they knew that Georgia Tech was going to come out and run the ball a lot. They were, basically had a running back playing quarterback in Matthew Jordan, and that's what they did. They came out and they ran the ball and controlled the clock for over 35 minutes of possession. And hearing Gerard Evans after the game, he said, we figured because of that we were going to have limited possessions, and they kind of tried to force some things, and they weren't playing as relaxed and as comfortable. And you saw Evans forcing a pick into the back of the end zone late in the first half. Second half, going over the middle. And
he had multiple picks, didn't he?
The same guy, Lawrence Austin, actually got him 2 times. And they had another 2 fumbles as a team as well. So the 4 turnovers, usually indicative of a team that's trying to do something, more than beyond their means. And I think that they just, guys were dropping passes. They weren't able to really put together a string of first downs like we've seen them do against numerous teams this season, and kind of a disappointing loss because Georgia Tech definitely a beatable team, but hey, rebound in a couple weeks, try this thing again against Virginia, and maybe they can clinch that division.
Absolutely, but going back to that Georgia Tech game again, what was the mood when you found out that Matthew Jordan would be starting? Because he was the backup. I didn't realize this, but Justin Thomas, their regular starter, is still out. I thought last year was his senior year, but he was back in 2016. But from what I hear, it was kind of like a game-time decision that he would not play and Matthew Jordan would get the start.
Well, early on, I mean, the defense looked pretty good against him. I think, they knew what that offense was going to be with Matt Jordan under center. They knew they're going to be a primarily run-based team, and they were getting I mean, it started, though, opening kickoff. The Hokies returned the opening kickoff, and they fumble right there. So Georgia Tech set up, inside the 30-yard line, opening minute of the game. And the defense stepped up big time. They held them to a field goal there, and they looked pretty good early. But after a while, they just started to wear down. And I don't know if it was just the culmination of all those runs piling up and their legs starting to get tired. I'm not sure if that's exactly what it was, but you saw late in the first half, Matthew Jordan just take up right down the middle, go 53 yards for a touchdown, basically untouched. And you saw a number of big plays like that they allowed. So I think that as the game went on, the defense just kind of wore down. And another thing that maybe gets overlooked sometimes is in the games past, we've seen the defense play well because the offense was able to really control the clock on the other side, move the ball, and let the defense get a bit of a rest. This week, they didn't have that opportunity because there were so many 3 and outs. The defense was right back on the field, and it happened throughout the entire game. So I think that puts a huge strain on them as well. And just an overall tough week for the Hokies, and the mood, which really, by the third quarter, is really deflated in the building there.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the Hokies have a bounce-back opportunity against the Notre Dame team that has really struggled so far this year. A perfect opportunity for a winnable game, kind of lift the team's spirits going into the big rivalry game with Virginia. I'm blanking right now on the number, but it's one of those games where the Hokies have the longest win streak over a single opponent right now in active college football history, and it's certainly going to be very interesting to see that game against the Cavaliers because you got both teams, with first head coaches. You have Justin Fuente coming over from Memphis, Virginia hiring Bronco Mendenhall away from BYU, so that's going to be very interesting. But again, a great opportunity just for the experience of going to South Bend, playing at Notre Dame Stadium against the Fighting Irish, no matter how good or bad Notre Dame is. Yeah,
not every day you get to play a non-conference game this late in the season, but a huge opportunity against Notre Dame, and they're definitely going to be motivated coming off of that loss. They want to show that was a fluke, and we've seen them earlier this season respond well after losses. Like the Boston College game was 49-0.
Yep.
They bounced back and they won that game. So a big opportunity for them once again, and I'm sure they got plenty of motivation to get it done. I saw Gerard Evans' face after the game. That guy hates to lose, you could tell.
Absolutely. Again, Virginia Tech on the road at Notre Dame this Saturday at 3:30, and then they're back home. Virginia, the game, that as of right now, that game time is still to be decided, but the game will be at Lane Stadium in Blacksburg. And again, it's coming down to the Virginia game. If the Hokies beat the Cavaliers, they are headed to Orlando for the ACC championship game against either Clemson or Louisville. Really quick.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, that should be a fun matchup, I think so, genuinely. Really quick, before we get into the bringing it up segment of the show, do want to mention a couple postseason awards were handed out by the Mountain East Conference. 4 Concord Mountain Lions on the All-Mountain East first team. You had Coleman Osborne and Paul Smith, 2 offensive linemen. Then you also had Jeremiah Johnson, the defensive back, and Zach Malone, linebacker, also on the first team. And then Darrell Johnson, the defensive lineman, on the second team. And then 2 players, Shadler Shepard and Garrett Lee, were named honorable mentions. So not the season Concord has been hoping for from a team standpoint, but from an individual standpoint, 7 players receiving postseason honors. That's to be commended.
Yeah, and it's nice to see the defense get some love because I think that they kind of got a rough shake of it this year. The offense really struggled to move the ball consistently. The running game was a huge problem for them most of the season. The defense actually played pretty well most of the games. They were able to force turnovers. They played physical. You saw them get beat up on the ground a couple of times where the front 7 was banged up and they were missing a few guys. But by and large, they did their best to keep Concord in games against some of the top teams in the conference. And, going forward, if they can keep that unit, together and elevate their play and start bringing in some offensive recruits as guys like Brian Novak and others, move on, then, the program will be all right.
Yeah, and also Bluefield College, their league, the Mid-South Conference, releasing their postseason honors. The Rams having 3 players on the East Division first team. You had Alex Martin, the leading rusher, Frank Brooks, the leading tackler, and offensive lineman Michael Hinckley, and then also 3 players on the second team, Jedediah Halla, Tracy Parker Jr., and Sean Cobb. And the great thing I think for the Rams is a lot of those players were not seniors. They'll be back in 2017. They'll be hungry for more success than back-to-back one-win seasons.
Yeah, definitely want to be looking for more than one win every season. And I think, that kind of thing, having some players get some recognition for their play individually will inspire the team, to want to try to do more and maybe try to achieve some team awards next season. So hopefully they can parlay that into some success.
Absolutely. So Concord and Bluefield, their seasons are over. They'll be looking forward to 2017. Again, we still have a couple weeks left. In the Division I FBS ranks, West Virginia with 3 games left, Marshall with 2, Virginia Tech with 2 games, maybe 3, depending on if they beat Virginia and that qualify for the ACC championship game in Orlando. But college basketball, we'll be getting into that in future episodes of the podcast. But we've already seen West Virginia off to winning starts. Yeah. They're 2-0. Marshall is off to a very good start. They're 2-0 as well. They beat Morehead State last night behind 30 points from Stevie Browning. Concord off to a good start. Their first 3 games, they're 2-1 under new head coach Todd May. And then Bluefield College and Bluefield State are also looking forward to good seasons. I had a chance to see last night the Battle of the Bluefields, Bluefield State at Bluefield College, both the men's and the women's teams. And the men was very energetic, very high-paced. You'll be seeing a couple games for both the Big Blues and the Rams this year. I think you'll have a lot of fun down in Bluefield. All
you Hoops fans, get excited. We got all kinds of action for you guys coming up. And, pretty soon after that, we'll have the high school 5th quarter. So it's hoop season. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. WVU Tech, by the way, also off to a good season. The men doing very well, a solid 500 start. And the women have also won 4 straight. They're on the road Thursday night at Wilberforce University in Ohio. And speaking of high school basketball, 5th quarter presented by Southern West Virginia returns Friday, January 6th. Our first episode, we will take you through the remainder of the regular season from January 6th right up. Our final episode will be the Friday before girls sectional play starts. Again, the way the schedule works out, the girls start a week before the boys and with the regular season and the playoffs. So that should be a fun time of high school basketball here in Southern West Virginia.
Yep, and we'll have a breakdown for you guys of the previews for some of these teams, especially Wyoming East girls. We're definitely going to get into, so we'll break that down in future episodes. So be sure to tune in for that.
Absolutely, a lot of teams that qualified for the state tournament last year, hoping to return. Not just Wyoming East girls, but Wyoming East boys. Woodrow Wilson, Greenbrier East, the girls team looking to get back to Charleston after just missing out last year. Fayetteville girls, they've been in Charleston each of the past 3 years. Kendall Millay, I know for one, would love to get back all 4 years. As a senior. Hannah Franklin too, who we had a former Wendy's Fan Cam Fan of the Week back in the football season. Now she's ready for basketball, so I think it's going to be a good season for high school basketball in West Virginia. Summers County as well. We can't talk high school basketball without giving some love to the Justice Twins and Summers County. New head coach, by the way, in Sarah Blevins, new classification because they did go down to class single A. But I'm looking forward to it.
It's going to be a big year, definitely.
All right.
You want to bring it home?
Let's bring it home. There's a reason Tom's wearing the Boston Red Sox cap today. It's a pretty good day to be. That's very true. But today, especially as opposed to other days, pretty good day to be a Red Sox fan.
Yeah, man. Nice news. The season didn't go the way the Red Sox expected, but Rick Porcello earned the Cy Young Award for the American League, and I think it's well-deserved. He won 23 games in the regular season. He was absolutely untouchable at Fenway Park this year, and it's really important that he had such a big season because David Price, until the latter half of the season, didn't pitch the way that Red Sox fans expected him, the way that his contract would indicate he should pitch. So Rick Porcello really stepped up and picked up the slack in that regard and allowed the Red Sox to be as successful as they were, which they really needed some semblance of pitching to go along with that offense that they had. So Porcello had an outstanding season. I know Justin Verlander and his spouse, Kate Upton, not so thrilled about the decision. But also, shout out to the former Tigers pitchers getting a lot of love in the Cy Young race.
True.
You have Porcello, a former Tiger, Justin Verlander in the running as well as a current Tiger, and then over in the National League, former Tiger Max Scherzer
winning the
taking
NL
home
Cy
the
Young
award. So shout out to him. He was on my fantasy team this year. He had an outstanding season. He likes to give up his home runs, but he struck out a lot of people this season, and hopefully the Nationals can kind of put it all together one of these days because they have a lot of talent on that team.
Absolutely. The one thing, going back to Porcello, the one thing I saw, it was one stat where he led the league in both wins and I think strikeout to walk ratio, and that was the first time that happened in 13 years. I didn't realize it was that rare to have a pitcher lead in both of those categories, but the last time to do that was Roy Halladay back in 2003, and of course he won the Cy Young that year. I think it makes perfect sense for Porcello.
And that shows you that the wins, obviously the win totals are inflated a little bit by how good that offense was, but when you look at his peripheral stats, the K to walk ratio, the ERA, that is what truly indicates that it wasn't just him going out there giving up 4 runs and then being bolstered by a bunch of David Ortiz homers. He really pitched very well for this team, and even on nights where he didn't get the run support, which happens on any team, he was still able to keep them in the game and win a lot of those close games. So congratulations to Rick, and congratulations to Mr. Scherzer and Mr. Verlander. You're a great pitcher. Better luck next year.
Absolutely. Really quick before we get into my breaking it down topics, I did see the 2 managers of the year as well. Terry Francona for the Indians and Dave Roberts for the Dodgers. Right?
A couple of 04 Red Sox
Absolutely.
Getting the award. I'd love to see it. I mean, This is a year of the former Red Sox with the Cubs getting the World Series title. Theo Epstein. You can go down the list with all the guys that played for the Red Sox on that Cubs team. It's just immense. And then over on the other side, Terry Francona. I mean, he's a fantastic manager. It's unfortunate for Red Sox fans that him and Theo had to go. Still a little upset about that one. But Francona had an outstanding season. He really did a great job with that Cleveland team, and especially in the postseason. They were down Danny Salazar and Carlos Carrasco, 2 of their great starting pitchers, and he was so genius with the way he improvised with that bullpen, bringing in Andrew Miller for multiple inning appearances, bringing him in like the 5th inning sometimes, just wherever the game needed that, presence of Andrew Miller, their best player. He didn't just go by the defined roles of he's the 7th inning guy, he's the 8th inning guy, he's the closer. He went with, what does my team need the most now to get this win, and then we'll figure it out the next day what we have to do to get the next win. And he used that formula to bring Cleveland all the way to the World Series. You really can't say enough about the job he's done with that young team over the last several years. So well-deserved. Dave Roberts on the other side, he's come into his own shoes as a manager, done a good job with that Dodgers team. It's going to be tough for them to break through with teams like the Cubs and the Nationals out there, but he's certainly guiding one of the best teams in baseball, and best of luck to him going forward as well.
Absolutely. I do think Dave Roberts was the right call over Madden, who did win the NL Manager of the Year last year.
He also butchered a few things in that World Series there with the way he used Aroldis Chapman. So it's great of a manager.
Very nearly lost.
Yeah, it's great of a manager Joe Madden is. If some things didn't go their way in the extra innings, people will be talking about him a lot differently.
Oh, yeah.
Based on that Game 7.
Yeah, well, obviously good news for baseball, not so good news for Team USA Soccer. My bringing it home topic. If you've seen my Twitter feed, you know I am not always shy about saying how I was at the very first Dos a Cero when the U.S. beat Mexico back in February 2001, and they parlayed that into 4 straight cycles of 2-0 home wins over the Mexican national team at Columbus Crew Stadium, now Montfrey Stadium. That was not to be the case this past weekend. A 2-1 loss on Friday that followed by a 4-0 embarrassment, quite frankly, on the road at Costa Rica, which, granted, I don't think it was super realistic to expect a win at Costa Rica. It's always a tough place to play, especially in this stage of World Cup qualifying, but you always hope for at least a draw, and it was scoreless in the final minutes of halftime before Tim Howard, Tim Howard, that injury occurred in the Mexico game. I'm getting ahead of myself. Brad Guzan played all 90 minutes. But you kind of feel that if the U.S. can keep it scoreless going into the locker room, coming out for the second half, they kind of have a chance, but it was not to be in Costa Rica, showing why they are so tough to beat at home. And the Americans, as a result, find themselves at the very bottom of the table, no points through 2 games. They have plenty of time to right the ship, but you really got to ask, is this the end of Klinsmann? I think it especially is if the Americans fail to qualify for the World Cup.
Well, credit to Costa Rica, a great team, but I hate to say it, this is the reason why soccer has yet to stick in the mainstream. We've been hearing for years now about soccer's, coming up in America, and I've worked with soccer enterprises, and a lot of really good people there who really care about the game and care about growing the game in the United States. But unfortunately, as long as the U.S. Gets blown out by teams like Costa Rica and they can't consistently defeat smaller countries and really be a superpower the way we are in so many other sports, they're just not going to be taken as seriously by the general mainstream public. There's always going to be the core fans who love to watch the team. I enjoy watching the U.S. national team, and I respect that, they've got a long way to go on the world stage, so you have to kind of manage expectations. But for them to really be considered a legitimate program, they're going to have to they need to have some stars come through their system. And I think that goes back to how they run their system. And whether that's firing Klinsmann, I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. One thing I do know, I've heard this from a lot of soccer guys, is the way that the game is coached at the youth level in the United States is there's such an emphasis placed on winning as opposed to skill development, where in the other parts of the world, they don't have as much organized soccer going on as kids grow up. You go to the streets of Europe, or you go down to Argentina where Messi's from, and it's just kids out there just playing in the street, no rules, just going at it, trying to be creative and try new moves. And that's why you see these teams that have such much better skill than the Americans. The Americans are as well conditioned as any team out there, but they don't have the ball skill, the foot skill, and just the kind of intangible soccer IQ that you see a lot of these other countries have. And that's the big thing that's got to change. So whether that's from a systematic all the way down to the youth level thing, I think that's probably part of it. Maybe, just for the momentum's sake, you think about changing the coach with Klinsmann. I know he's, people have been frustrated with him as of late, but they've got to do something to get themselves to the next step. And one thing I have heard about this new kid, Pulisic.
Yeah, Christian Pulisic.
Yeah,
one of several who's played in the past few games, who plays professionally in the German Bundesliga.
Yeah, he's making some waves with Borussia Dortmund, and just 18 years old, correct? So there's a ray of hope right there if you're an American soccer fan.
There certainly is a ray around that. There really is. To go back to your comments about Klinsmann and the development program, the fact that he right now oversees the entire development. He's not just the head coach of the national team that competes at the World Cup and at senior competitions. He's in charge of the whole top to bottom. In charge of overseeing that. Will his role change between now and March when the U.S. is next in action in World Cup qualifying? Who knows? We will certainly be keeping an eye on that. But again, the magic number for the U.S., they need to be in the top 3 to qualify automatically for the World Cup in Russia. If they finish 4th, they will play a team from another confederation. I don't know the matchup this year or for this cycle. I think it's one of the teams from Asia or the Oceania representative. So in that case, you would like their chances. But if the way the cycle works out this year, they go up against South America, you definitely want to finish in the top 3. You don't want to have. You don't want to go into a playoff with a team from South America where the winner goes to the World Cup, the loser stays home. That's never a good feeling for any North American team.
That won't be fun. And they represented themselves well in was it the Gold Cup that was earlier this summer where they were facing off against
yes,
and they beat Ecuador.
That was the Gold Cup.
I mean, they got kind of blown out by Argentina.
Copa America.
Copa America. Yeah. Okay, sorry. But they did represent themselves against South America well there. But in general, I mean, there's so many powerhouses in that part of the world. It's best if you can avoid that territory.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, if they qualify for the top 3 after their 10 games, they are automatically going to the World Cup in Russia in 2018. I assume, or as of right now, the World Cup is still going to be held in Russia in 2018. I think it's kind of...
As far as 2022, we'll see
I think it's kind of too late to pull 2018 away, especially because the other thing with my thing that has always been, since they awarded the bids, Russia at least does have the infrastructure, and it's a matter of upgrading it. Qatar 2022, they don't have the infrastructure at all, and they're committing all these alleged human rights violations in the process of building these stadiums.
But never good when you have slaves working on stadiums.
On a more positive note, the NASCAR chase for the Sprint Cup comes to an end this Sunday at Homestead Miami Speedway. 4 drivers left: Jimmy Johnson, Joey Logano, Kyle Busch, and Carl Edwards, 2 Joe Gibbs Racing teammates. We have 1 Hendrick Motorsports and 1 Team Penske driver. Jimmy Johnson, of course, has won 6 titles. Kyle Busch, the defending Sprint Cup champion, then Carl Edwards and Joey Logano, they have both made it to this championship stage in the past, but could this be the year one of them finally breaks through and wins that Sprint Cup title? It should be fun to watch, I think.
Yeah, it'll be competitive for sure. I think Jimmy Johnson, though, I think you get to this point in the season, and he's shown he's got that killer instinct. He's going for number 7, and I think he's he got his win for the champion to get him into the championship round. He got that out of the way early, and I think he's just been kind of biding his time. And I think Jimmy Johnson's going to be the guy to come out and take it on Sunday.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't the case where he had to win at Phoenix going into those final laps, because I'm sure you probably saw with Matt Kenseth, he was in a situation where he needed the win, and he led going into the final laps.
Yeah.
I mean, he trying to remember whether it was his car or Alex Bowman's car that was truly at fault, but Bowman basically T-boned Kenseth, ending Kenseth's championship hopes.
Yeah, and it's the tough part of NASCAR. You got guys 200 miles an hour in close quarters going around a track, and that stuff happens, man.
Yeah, absolutely. But that championship race should be fun to watch. Again, Johnson, Edwards, Kyle Busch, and Logano. One of these four will be the NASCAR Sprint Cup champion for 2016. Well, that will wrap it up for this edition of The Change Up on WOAY Sports. Again, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at SportsWOAY. We will be taking next week off for Thanksgiving. We will rejoin you after Thanksgiving to talk a review of high school football. Of course, if either Fayetteville or James Monroe was in the Super 6 in Wheeling, we'll certainly be mentioning that, but we'll also be getting a lot into high school basketball, as that week will be the start of the regular season for the girls. The boys will open their regular season the following week. But again, you can find us online at SportsWOAY on Facebook and Twitter, or you can follow us individually on Twitter. I'm at Digby Matt. He's at Tom Beal WOAY.
Give me a follow.
Absolutely. Give us both follows, and give our sports account a follow too. And we bring you the best sports coverage in Southern West Virginia. That will not change as 2016 moves into 2017. But for Tom and for the guys in the back, I'm Matt. That will wrap up this episode. We'll see you next time on The Change Up on WOAY Sports.